And it will be said again, not only do we have to be divine scientists, divine physicists and divine alchemists, but we have to be divine mystics. And it also has to be repeated that the way of stories is not to edify, educate and entertain, even though it may appear that they do so. The purpose of the stories is to undermine and dismantle what it is we think and believe, so that we have the possibility of experiencing the divine scientist, physicist, alchemist, and mystic that we are. To that end, there's a story about a great Jewish mystic who was called the Seer of Lublin. Now, he was called a seer because he knew the beginning and the end and all that was in between of souls. And with this knowing and seeing, he was able to perform what people considered to be miracles. Now, one day after a session at the synagogue, the seer of Lublin was standing watching all those who had been present leave. And then there was Menahem. He tripped over his feet. He tripped down the stairs. He bumped into the doorway. Menahem was like the town fool. And the seer of Lublin, standing there, called Menahem over to him. Now Menahem was wearing a shirt that had one yellow sleeve and one blue sleeve and a green back and a red collar, white lapels, bits and pieces of all the shirts that had fallen apart on his back that he'd patched together. So when he stood very shyly in front of the great seer of Lublin, the mystic looked at him and said, Menahem, Menahem, wait here just a moment. And the seer went off to his back room where he slept. And he brought out with him a shirt. And he said, here, Menahem, this is for you. Menahem was overwhelmed. A shirt that was one color, the lapels, the collar, the fronts, the sleeves were all blue. But the seer of Lublin said to Menahem, take this shirt and wear it, but be a mensch. Now, in their language, mensch means to be compassionate, to be human, to be caring. So Menahem took the shirt and took off his patchwork shirt and put on the blue shirt, and he went out into the street. He was so happy. He kept turning around so his head could see, looking down at the sleeves and feeling at this wonderful shirt that his very beloved rabbi had given him. But as he was walking down the street, the town drunk approached him and said, Menahem, what's happened to you? Menahem stood up proudly with his blue shirt on, showing it off, feeling the sleeves, and this is a gift from my rabbi, he said. Oh, said the drunk, I love that shirt. I wish I had a shirt like that. "Oh, if only I had a shirt like that." Menahem said, "Do you want it?" "Yes," said the drunk. So Menahem took off his shirt and gave it to the drunk. Well, the drunk didn't even say thank you. He went racing off down the street to the inn. He went into the inn, held up the shirt, and he said, "Who will give me a bid for the shirt of the great seer of Lublin?" Well, the innkeeper knew a deal when he heard it. And he said, "A year's supply of free grog." "I'll take it," said the drunk. The very next day, the innkeeper went out into the square, holding up the shirt. "Who will bid me for the shirt of the great seer of Lublin? Whoever wears it, if they are barren, will have a child. Whoever wears it, their fortunes will change." Well, as it so happened, the rabbi came by, and he was aghast to see what was going on, and he was greatly shocked at the price that was given for his shirt. But over there stood Menahem, and the seer of Lublin turned around and glowered at Menahem, who shrunk down with shame. And he ran over to the rabbi to explain. But the seer of Lublin said, "Not now, Menahem, not now," turned his back on Menahem and went marching off down the road. Well, Menahem was shattered. He ran, he didn't know where he was running, tears rolling down his face, and he found himself in the cemetery. Sat down in the cemetery with tears rolling down. "What have I done? My rabbi is angry with me, and why? Every time I try to do good, something bad happens." And then a stranger walked by and saw him crying and went over to him and said, "Who is it has passed?" Menahem said, "It's me, it's myself. I'm no good. My rabbi is angry with me." And the stranger said, "Let me tell you a story." He said, "In the town that I came from, there was a man who was the greatest robber in town. He was the greatest thief. He was a master thief. He'd ask you for the time of day, and before you knew it, your watch was gone without you even realizing it." But he said, this robber became so wealthy that he became revered in town, to a degree that he was invited to the synagogue. Well, when he went to the synagogue, he learned and realized that being a thief and a robber wasn't the thing to do. So he decided to mend his ways. But when he mended his ways, he didn't have enough food to feed his family. One day, the richest man in town was passing by and saw the thief sitting on his doorstep with his wife and family, who were obviously starving, and decided to give him alms. And so he did. Every week the rich man would give to the thief that used to be to feed his family. And then it so happened that both the rich man and the thief died at the same time. And the rich man found himself at the gates of heaven, with the angel there, with the scales to weigh up the good deeds and the bad deeds of the rich man. And when they were put on the scales tipped down because his bad deeds outweighed his good. And he said, what am I going to do? What happened? And then all of a sudden, a wind came by. And he found himself inside heaven's gates. And he said, what happened? What happened? And the angel said, you know your friend the thief? Well, he stole your sins. How, and perhaps we might ask ourselves, how does this story, this enigmatic story, undermine and perhaps begin to dismantle what it is that we've had in our minds, our conditioned minds, about what a mystic is? Well, you know the way of stories. We've been together long enough, and you've heard enough stories to recognize that they have their own way. They work inside us like a chemistry. We may think about them. We may not, with our minds, be able to bring an understanding of them, but they work. And when it's said and confirmed that their purpose is to dismantle the conditioning of our minds so that we can experience and manifest what it is that we are, then you can only allow them to do their work. And so it is with this story too. Let it work in its own way in you, and recognize that its and their divine alchemy is like a divine acid, taking away from us the conditioning, the fixed thoughts of what this and that is, so that we can experience the divine scientist, physicist, alchemist, and mystic that we are.